Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise? Okay, everybody take some rubbers.
A great scene from a great movie. The Mean Girls sex ed scene is famous, getting a laugh from almost every watch, myself included. Yet this short and comedic skit is also designed to point a finger at the flaws and inaccuracies of abstinence-only education in the United States. It's time that we talk about our sex ed. Reproductive health education, otherwise known as sex education, has been a topic of discussion for centuries. People often debate about how to introduce topics such as bodily anatomy, consent, sexual pleasure and intimacy, relationships, gender identity, body image, birth control, STIs, and more, dragging in political opinions as well as religious beliefs when discussing. Generally speaking, there are two major perspectives on how to teach these topics: abstinence-only education and comprehensive or inclusive education. Abstinence-only education, sometimes called sexual risk avoidance education, is a type of sexual education that only includes information encouraging youth to abstain from sex until marriage. This curriculum teaches abstaining from sex is the expected behavior for teenagers and excludes information about contraceptive options, says CNBC. Comprehensive sex education is often seen as the opposite, providing students with information about abstinence as well as safer sex practices. Let's listen to a deeper introduction to this topic from CNBC.
There's been a debate spanning decades about what information to include in the curriculum.
We believe that sex education is an economic justice issue for the ability of giving young people the determination over their own decision-making as it relates to families and sexual activity and behavior.
As a society becomes more diverse, it's ever more difficult to have any sort of consensus on a subject like sex and sexuality because it's so deeply connected to our ideas about ourselves as human beings. So the politics of this are complicated.
Most young people are getting something. They're just not getting very much sex education.
There is no national or federal mandate around sex education. And so what kids are taught in schools varies by state, by county, even by school.
So why is abstinence-only education such a problem? First off, abstinence-only education has been proven to not decrease the rates of intimacy among teens. A quote from Abstinence Education Overview says a 7-year study from 1998 to 2005, directed by Mathematical Policy Research Incorporated, under the Department of Health and Human Services grant, studied students in 4 abstinence-only programs and drew strong conclusions about the program's effectiveness. Young people in such programs were no more likely than youth to postpone or abstain from sex, had roughly the same numbers of sexual partners, and started having sex at close to the same ages. About half of the young people studied in the programs abstained from sex throughout the survey period, but so did half the young people not in such programs. Furthermore, students who receive comprehensive sexual education do not increase in sexual activity and have been shown to be more likely to use contraceptives overall. The list of flaws that the United States sexual education system has is far too long. One survey reported that less than 50% of adolescents reported in 2015 through 2019 that they had received instructions on where to get birth control before they had had sex for the first time, meaning that the information comes too little too late for the vast majority of students. Let's take a listen to this quote from Caroline Noakes.
We're leaving young people without the skills and tools that they need in order to equip themselves for adult lives.
Another quote from Abstinence Education Overview says that in an era in which more than half of all new HIV infections occur in people under the age of 25 and are acquired through unprotected sexual intercourse, abstinence-only education is a failed strategy, critics contend, that lacks the support of the majority of the American public. Not only does this type of education not prepare students for properly protecting themselves, they also have been known to over-exaggerate the failure levels of different contraceptive methods instead of offering a comprehensive pro versus con style of teaching. Students should learn about all different types of contraceptives, not just condoms, and how to effectively use them. Many psychologists and educators also claim that waiting until adulthood to talk about sex and treating sex like a problem often creates issues later in life. Virginity culture is responsible for creating a lot of shame in young adults and transforms information about natural processes into something taboo.
It was something that was secret all the time, and it was hush-hush, and it seemed to have sort of a dirty connotation to it. Yeah, because it was like, you don't talk about that, and you wouldn't tell any of your friends that you were having a period.
Reproductive health curriculum also has the responsibility of preparing students to face adult relationships. Edie Utopia says that the more we talk about sex and agency in late childhood and teen years, the less likely it is that abusive dynamics will arise. Another quote says that according to a 2004 report prepared for the House Democrats, language used in abstinence-based curricula often reinforces gender stereotypes about female passivity and male aggressiveness, attitudes that often correlate with harmful outcomes, including domestic violence, the report notes. This brings me to my next point, that the U.S. curriculums are especially detrimental to young women, as well as marginalized groups like queer youth and intersex individuals. Lack of sex education is particularly harmful to teens who are sexually active, teens who are queer or intersex, and victims of sexual abuse. HRC.org says that the research also showed that LGBTQ plus youth have a limited number of trusted adults they feel comfortable talking with about sexual health, so they frequently seek information online or from peers. Much of the sexual information online is neither age-appropriate nor medically accurate, and peers may be misinformed. If we take a look at some of the results from a survey that I conducted in our community, we find a couple of interesting things about this topic. 91% of respondents indicated that they never learned about intersexuality in schools, intersexuality being the term for people born with male and female biological qualities. 3.5% of the same respondents indicated that they only learned about intersex anatomy and do not know male or female anatomy. This is highly unlikely and further proves the fact that most teenagers do not know this term at all. This matters because nearly 2% of our population is intersex, making up millions of teens currently in the U.S. Focusing in on the LGBTQ+ community, very few curriculums include anything to do with gender or sexuality. In fact, 8 states make it completely unallowed to be taught. North Carolina in particular does very poorly at educating on this topic, with over 60% of students having never heard about the topic in school.
Tom's lawmakers are restricting discussions about gender identity and sexuality in schools. North Carolina law requires schools to teach that monogamous, heterosexual marriages are the safest. Some say the standards should be more inclusive of LGBTQ+ people.
So we're leaving them out of the educational sphere without arming them with the tools necessary to have responsible sex.
Re-emphasizing the point at the beginning of that clip, North Carolina state curriculum says that educators must teach that a mutually faithful, monogamous, heterosexual relationship in the context of marriage is the best lifelong means of avoiding sexually transmitted diseases. This point, among others in the curriculum, is absolutely outdated and not inclusive. It furthers negative stereotypes of queer relationships and pigeonholes the wide spectrum of healthy relationship options. The North Carolina curriculum also fails to include information on topics such as fertility treatment, non-penetrative sexual acts, reproductive health clinics and services, and more. North Carolina also does not allow for the distribution of condoms or other contraceptives on school property, a practice that has been proven to be effective in decreasing teen pregnancy rates. CAPs, or condom availability programs, also do not increase sexuality among teens and help prevent the spreading of STIs like HIV. As of 2014, only 7.2% of high schools in the U.S. had condom availability to students. NC curriculum does include information on resources about sexual violence and assault, as well as domestic abuse. However, the information is very focused on victims and not as much on preventing the incidences from occurring in the future. Many classrooms leave it to the victim to protect themselves instead of teaching better values to everyone earlier on. Though the NC curriculum does include more information than many states, it is still fairly ineffective in its goals. Only 9.3% of respondents to my survey indicated that they felt fully prepared by the school's lessons, and 64.8% of respondents indicated that they were left with very many questions unanswered. When discussing the topic, students also referenced moments from the lessons that felt incredibly out of touch, like when teenagers were encouraged to hold hands with their partner instead of pursuing their sexual desires. It's not just the students that are disappointed by their curriculum. Many countrywide surveys have shown that the general public does not favor this strict and incomplete method of education either. One study found that more than 89% of parents that identified as Republicans or Democrats support including a wide range of topics in sex education, including puberty, healthy relationships, abstinence, sexually transmitted diseases, and birth control in high school.
Based on your life experience and everything, how do you think that sexual education should be taught nowadays?
Well, I think there should be more of an awareness given to girls.
I would like to be assured that it is not an abstinence-only curriculum anywhere, because that's just irresponsible and unrealistic in every possible way. And I think it definitely needs to be more LGBTQIA inclusive. And I think, based on my interactions, particularly with AFAB students, we need to do a better job of teaching people about their bodies, how to take care of their bodies, how to advocate for what their body needs from the right professionals. Sounds like we're not getting enough there, so those would be top priorities.
Even students indicated that they do not want abstinence-only education. In fact, 78.6% of students responded that they wanted a comprehensive-based reproductive education program. It is clear that if this is not the opinion of the general public, it is really only the extremists that are creating these problematic curricula and fighting properly educating our youth.
The curriculum is morally reprehensible and unnecessarily graphic.
That it contains unscientific socio-political agendas, such as gender identity, I think is extremely alarming and should not be classified as education.
Because this isn't education, this is indoctrination. There's no difference between this and what Hitler did with the children of the Reich.
It's time that as a community we recognize the benefits and importance of comprehensive sexual education in schools across the U.S. and realize that focusing on abstinence alone does not work. We are not indoctrinating our youth. We are educating them as young adults and providing them with the information that they need in order to become happy, healthy adults. Schools must assume that students do not have a reliable source of information outside of the classroom and realize that means that we cannot leave gaps in information. Limiting the information that teenagers receive does not prevent them from getting the information in a likely worse way somewhere else. And lack of education does not equal less sexual activity.
Students will sometimes act kind of closed off, but I think just making it very open and honest and transparent that this isn't anything awkward to me and it's important for y'all to know, and that I think just opens it up to where it's a little more comfortable.
We do not need to feel embarrassed to be discussing these topics. The embarrassment arises when we put shame on the word sex, pressure on the scientifically fake concept of virginity, and expect for every student to fit into the same little box that the curriculum says we should. Let's wrap this discussion up with a final clip from the news station CNBC.
I hope to see in the world is really universal comprehensive sex education being offered. We are working with the federal government and members of Congress to advance new legislation, the Real Education and Access for Healthy Youth Act, that speaks directly to those needs. I also believe that it means that we are doing the right thing by talking about sex education from this bigger goal perspective than just preventing teenage pregnancy.